"We can hire 3 junior engineers for your salary," Brandon said flatly, his tone void of emotion. "Nothing personal, just business." The words echoed in the room like the slam of a heavy door. Michael Trent blinked once, twice, but didn't react. He didn't need to. The message was clear. The 32nd floor of AmeriCorps Living's headquarters in downtown Chicago was dressed in brushed steel and glass, its skyline view intentionally designed to impress. But behind the modern finish was a company losing touch with its foundation. The room where the meeting took place was impersonal. Just a long table, a muted smart screen scrolling quarterly performance charts, and 3 people performing a very old ritual, the silent execution of loyalty in the name of profit. Michael Trent, age 55, had spent nearly 2 decades as the silent architect of AmeriCorps' technology backbone. Reserved, dependable, and fiercely competent, he wasn't the kind to make waves. He made systems work. Across the table sat Brandon Cole, 42, the new chief technology officer brought in from a fintech startup in San Francisco. With his tailored blazer, expensive haircut, and a resume polished by a Stanford MBA, Brandon represented the company's pivot toward youth and image. Next to him was Diane Lawson, director of HR, holding a closed beige folder like a weapon she wasn't sure how to wield. Brandon delivered the news like a consultant giving a PowerPoint. "We're restructuring. Your role is no longer cost viable. We've calculated that hiring 3 junior engineers would not only match but exceed your output at a third of the cost." He smiled like someone who thought he was being reasonable. Michael didn't return it. Years of service, erased by a spreadsheet. He could almost admire the efficiency. Diane slid the folder across the table. Inside, severance paperwork, 2 months' salary, accrued vacation, COBRA, insurance details. Brandon leaned back, studying Michael. He expected anger, disbelief, maybe a refusal to sign, or threats of legal action. Instead, Michael reached for the folder, opened it, scanned the terms, and nodded. "Is that all?" he said, his voice even. Brandon blinked. "I assumed you'd have questions, concerns." "Seems pretty straightforward to me," Michael replied. Diane looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed by the quiet finality. The tension in the room thickened, not from what was said, but from what wasn't. Brandon had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Michael stood. He didn't flinch, didn't demand an explanation, didn't remind them that the entire infrastructure, tenant portals, maintenance automation, payment systems, was his design. He simply extended his hand. Brandon shook it, unsure. Diane mumbled something about transition assistance. Michael didn't respond. The moment was supposed to be tense, maybe even explosive. Instead, it was hollow. He returned to his office. The space felt smaller now, its energy drained. With clinical efficiency, he began packing. A photo of his wife and kids, an old server logbook he kept out of habit, a mug from a company retreat 10 years ago. 18 years in a box. He passed by cubicles where eyes refused to meet his. Some co-workers typed furiously, pretending not to notice. Others gave awkward, almost apologetic glances. Only a junior engineer named Martin offered a quiet, "Sorry, Mr. Trent." Michael nodded, said nothing. He knew how these things worked. They were afraid they'd be next. The elevator ride down was long and silent. In the parking garage, he placed the box in the back seat of his pickup, then leaned against the door, exhaling slowly. The weight wasn't just from the job. It was from the betrayal of being treated as obsolete. His phone buzzed. A text from Alan Reyes, his loyal DBA for over a decade. "The team is freaking out. They just tried to run a maintenance script and it failed. No one knows how it works. We need you." Michael read it, then locked the screen without replying. He got into his truck, looked one last time at the building in the rearview mirror, and started the engine. The sun over Lake Michigan cast golden reflections on his windshield. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He was simply ready for whatever came next. Michael sat on his back deck overlooking Lake Michigan, a glass of bourbon in one hand and silence in the other. The city lights flickered in the far distance, But on his porch in Evanston, everything stood still. A slight breeze rustled through the oak trees. Elaine stepped out quietly, wrapping a cardigan around her shoulders. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Their home was modest but comfortable, perched at the edge of the North Shore. It had taken years to pay off, and it held decades of memories: painted walls, creaky stairs, and a study that Michael had filled with old blueprints, hard drives, and dusty technical journals. From their back deck, the horizon offered a daily reminder of calm. Tonight, though, it was a place of reckoning. Elaine Trent was sharp but gentle, an elementary school teacher who had learned to read not only books, but people. She had stood by Michael through 27 years of marriage, through the lean years, the big wins, and the quiet compromises. Michael, normally reserved and focused, was unusually quiet that evening. Still in the same shirt he wore to the office that morning, he looked like a man who hadn't yet decided what the next chapter would be, or if there even would be one. "They didn't see your value," Elaine said. Michael stared into the dark water. "No, they didn't. But maybe that's my fault." She frowned. "How is that your fault? I made everything so seamless, so invisible. They forgot it wasn't magic. It was me. Years of code, late nights, testing backups, building firewalls. They never really saw it, and I never really made them look." It was the kind of pain that didn't come from failure. It came from being erased. Michael started talking, not about the firing, but about the journey. Back in 2007, when AmeriCorps was still called Bayview Holdings, they'd had 4 buildings and 2 dusty desktops connected by dial-up. Harold Bay, the original owner, had approached Michael with a simple request: build us something solid, and he had. Over the years, Michael created an integrated platform that evolved from a basic scheduling script to a full-service management system: leasing, background checks, automated maintenance, rent collection, live tenant chat. Bit by bit, it grew into a system that spanned 4 states, 63 properties, and over 15,000 tenants. "Do you remember when I figured out how to run cross-checks between maintenance delays and rent delinquencies?" he asked, almost smiling. "It dropped complaints by 30% in 2 months." Elaine chuckled. "You celebrated harder than when we got the mortgage cleared." Michael's tone darkened. "But none of it was ever documented. Every time I asked for a documentation team, it was too expensive. They wanted new office chairs, branding refreshes, onboarding videos, everything but what mattered." He sipped his bourbon. "I warned them. If I left, no one would know how to maintain it. The redundancies, the logic trees, the security layers. I built them because the company needed resilience, but they never funded continuity." Elaine sat beside him and put her hand over his. "That's not on you. That's on them. You did your job. They didn't." Later inside the house, the warm glow of a vintage lamp illuminated the photo shelf. One picture showed a young Michael with his first AmeriCorps tech team, Jason, Mel, and Alan, standing in front of their first server rack. Jason had moved to Denver. Mel switched careers. Only Alan stayed, still texting Michael occasionally for advice. He checked his phone. Another message from Alan. "They tried running a patch. The portal's down. Payment processing is stuck. Brandon is panicking." Michael placed the phone face down. He sat at his desk and opened his aging laptop. Not to search for jobs, he didn't feel ready for that, but to open a blank document. His resume hadn't been touched since Obama's second term. The blinking cursor looked like a challenge. He typed one word: systems, then stopped, then typed more. Hours passed. Elaine went to bed. Michael stayed at his desk, sketching new architecture diagrams on legal pads. He wasn't doing it for AmeriCorps. He wasn't doing it for a paycheck. He was doing it because he still believed in doing things right. Then quietly, his phone buzzed. Subject: opportunity to connect. Lawrence Devlin, Phoenix Estates. He opened the email. "Mr. Trent, I've followed your work at AmeriCorps for years. We're looking to upgrade our infrastructure and are seeking someone who builds systems that last. Would you be open to a conversation?" Michael leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming. He tapped the desk twice, then closed the email tab. "Not done. Not even close. We'll pay $500 an hour. Just come in for one day. Brandon's voice cracked through the phone like a man dangling over the edge. It had been just over 2 weeks since Michael's departure. He now split his time between long walks along Lake Michigan and late nights sketching system architecture in a leather-bound journal. But on this particular morning, the quiet was interrupted. His phone vibrated with a string of increasingly desperate messages, missed calls, voicemails, emails, the familiar buzz of urgency. But this time, it wasn't his fire to put out. Brandon Cole was unraveling. The polished facade had dulled under pressure, his bravado now punctuated by panic. Alan Reyes, the loyal database administrator, had stayed in touch through cautious texts. Diane from HR left a carefully worded voicemail asking to revisit the topic of short-term consulting. Even Justin Bayou, son of the original founder and a current board member, had sent a brief message. "We'd like to speak, off the record." AmeriCorps' systems were failing. The tenant portal had gone dark. Maintenance requests weren't processing. Payment transactions bounced or misfired. Brandon's fresh hires, bright-eyed graduates, couldn't decipher Michael's code, much less fix anything. The company was hemorrhaging credibility. And Michael? He remained silent. The first voicemail had been almost casual. "Hey, Michael, just a quick heads up. We're having a bit of trouble with the payment system. Nothing urgent, just wondering if you'd be open to a short consult." By the third message, the tone shifted. "We're running into serious integration issues. The junior team is doing their best, but, well, we could really use your insight." By the seventh message, it was no longer veiled. "We'll pay. Name your rate. We just need the system up, today." Alan's text told a clearer story. "No one knows how your redundancy scripts work. They tried rolling back a patch. Crashed the back end. System's been down for 36 hours. People are freaking out." Michael didn't reply to any of it. That evening, as the sun dipped low, a knock came at his door. He opened it to find Brandon standing there, no longer the confident executive, but a man clearly unraveling. His tie was loose, hair unkempt. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Victor, Michael. Sorry, listen, we have a critical failure. Nothing is working. Our backups, they're not syncing. The consultants don't know what to do. We need your help. Name your price. The board has approved $500 an hour. Anything. Just, please." Michael didn't say anything right away. He looked at the man who had once dismissed him like a budget line item. Then he thought about Elaine, the long nights, the birthdays missed because a server glitched at midnight, and the documentation team he was never allowed to build. He finally responded, voice calm and deliberate. "I'm not available. I've taken on other commitments." Brandon's shoulders dropped. "Is it about the money?" "No," Michael replied. "It's about respect. You didn't value the work it took to build something that didn't break. And now that it's broken, you want me back. Not because you believe in me, but because you have no other option." Brandon looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. He muttered something about legal implications, intellectual property, even hinted at sabotage. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Every line of code belongs to AmeriCorps, as specified in my contract. I took nothing except experience. But you had chance after chance to prepare for this, and you chose to ignore them." Later that night, Michael sat at his desk, rereading an email from Lawrence Devlin of Phoenix Estates. It was clear, concise, and full of genuine respect. "We admire what you built. We're expanding and want a system that doesn't just work, it lasts. Interested in talking?" He clicked reply. "I am." And for the first time in weeks, Michael felt something lift. Not pride, not revenge, just clarity. The next chapter wouldn't be about proving himself. It would be about building something better, from the ground up, and this time, on his terms. "We lost Stonebridge," Alan's message read. Just 4 words, but they carried the weight of collapse. Stonebridge Residential, AmeriCorps' biggest client, had jumped ship. Phoenix Estates' Austin headquarters buzzed with energy and optimism. Unlike the cold chrome of AmeriCorps, this place was alive. Whiteboards full of ideas, engineers in jeans debating cloud structure. The atmosphere was tight-knit, collaborative, almost like a tech startup. But with the Stonebridge deal, everything was about to scale. Michael Trent had just settled into his role as Chief Technology Officer at Phoenix Estates. His new team was young but eager. Lawrence Knight, the company's founder and CEO, had backed Michael fully, trusting in his vision for long-term infrastructure. Then came Jeffrey Stone, the CEO of Stonebridge Residential, whose arrival brought urgency and pressure. Stonebridge managed over 10,000 units across the Northeast. With AmeriCorps' system failing, they needed a replacement fast. But Phoenix wasn't yet built for that scale. If they rushed and failed, it would bury both companies. If they passed, it would catapult Phoenix to the top of the industry. Michael stood at the crossroads of risk and opportunity. Jeffrey flew in from New York to meet face-to-face. They met in a quiet conference room, away from distractions. "We're willing to pay for infrastructure," he said, "but we need stability. We need it in 12 weeks. Michael thought carefully before answering. "We'll need 3 more senior engineers, dedicated servers, cloud scalability, and full documentation. No shortcuts." Lawrence raised an eyebrow at the word documentation. "That alone adds 3 weeks," he said. Michael didn't flinch. "That's where AmeriCorps failed. I won't repeat their mistake." Lawrence stared at the plan, then back at Michael. "You're asking us to go all in." "I'm not asking," Michael replied quietly. "I'm telling you what it takes to do this right." A long pause, then Lawrence extended his hand. "All right, we're all in." Suddenly the tension broke. The team shifted into motion. Engineers were hired, hardware ordered, timelines mapped out. Michael worked 12-hour days architecting a modular, scalable system. Alan joined the team officially, bringing his knowledge of AmeriCorps' old systems. Together, they built a hybrid infrastructure, one that could gradually onboard Stonebridge's properties without crashing under pressure. Training documents, security protocols, and failover redundancies were baked into every sprint. The atmosphere was electric. Unlike AmeriCorps, everyone at Phoenix listened, asked questions, cared. Then came a message from Justin Bayou, the son of AmeriCorps' original founder. "Michael, I want to apologize. The board was misled. Graham's gone. If you ever consider coming back, the door's open." Michael stared at the message, unmoving. He didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop and checked the Phoenix migration schedule. 2 weeks until the first rollout. Stonebridge's smallest region, 2,000 units in upstate New York, would go live. If successful, the rest would follow. Outside his office window, the Texas sun was setting, casting golden hues over the city. Elaine called from Chicago, checking in, her voice soft with encouragement. "You sound different," she said. "Lighter." "I am," Michael replied. He leaned back in his chair for the first time in a long while, feeling like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not just building systems, but building something that mattered. The comeback wasn't loud. It wasn't vengeful. It was methodical, steady, and unmistakably his. "Name your price," Brandon's voice cracked over the phone. "The board is desperate." It was a stormy Thursday evening in Evanston. Rain lashed against the windows of Michael's study as he sipped coffee from his Phoenix Estates mug. The warm glow of his desk lamp cut through the gloom, illuminating sketches of modular systems and infrastructure diagrams he had started outlining for Phoenix. A soft hum from the fireplace filled the room with comfort, but the tension on the phone call shattered the stillness. Brandon Cole, once smug, now shaken. His signature overconfidence had eroded into a nervous, pleading tone. The board of AmeriCorps was in chaos. Systems were failing across the country. Tenants were angry, lawsuits were brewing, and in the eye of that storm sat Michael Trent, a man they had cast out. Brandon wanted Michael back, urgently. The offer, full salary reinstated, a signing bonus, and complete control to fix what was now clearly broken. But Michael knew better. This wasn't redemption, it was desperation, and no paycheck could erase what AmeriCorps had chosen to destroy. Calls came daily. Diane from HR left voice messages cloaked in politeness, but weighed down with panic. Alan, still feeding Michael intel, texted, "They're circling the drain, lost 3 regional managers. Legal's panicking." Brandon's offers kept climbing. First $300 an hour, then $500. Then the big ask, What will it take to bring you in for just 2 days? Michael stayed silent, not out of vengeance, but because he didn't want to build rescue rafts for captains who ignored every warning. Each hour he didn't respond, AmeriCorps bled deeper. Every skipped documentation request, every junior hire who didn't understand the logic behind the code. It was all playing out exactly as Michael predicted. Then came the threat. Brandon, in a last-ditch email, wrote, "There may be legal implications here, Michael. If we determine the system was made intentionally difficult to maintain." Michael read the line 3 times, not believing the audacity. He took a breath, picked up the phone, and called Brandon directly. "Let me make this clear," he said evenly. "Every line of code I wrote belonged to AmeriCorps. I asked for a documentation team for 10 years. You all said no. I've taken nothing but my experience. If your lawyers want to talk, mine are ready." There was silence on the other end. Michael hung up and sat back in his chair, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the simmering anger he had kept buried. He hadn't wanted to feel it. He wanted to rise above it. But the suggestion that he had sabotaged the system, a system he'd built with care, cut deeper than he expected. Just then, a knock. Alan stood at the front door, damp from rain, holding a laptop bag. "Got time for lunch tomorrow?" he asked. They met at a small deli down the street the next day. Over turkey sandwiches and root beer, Alan laid it all out. "It's worse than you think," he said, voice low. "They've lost historical data going back 3 years. Backups failed. No one followed the protocol." Then Alan leaned in, eyes scanning the room. "I found something. Emails between Brandon and the board. He planned your termination months in advance. Told them your architecture was intentionally complex, and you made yourself indispensable by design." Michael didn't react, not right away, but something shifted in his posture, like a weight had moved from his shoulders to his spine. He said he could transition to off-the-shelf systems and save over $1 million a year, Alan added. "But that's not even the worst of it. The private equity firm, they're trying to sell AmeriCorps. All of this, just pre-sale cleanup." Michael sat in silence. He looked at Alan and asked quietly, "Why are you telling me this?" Alan zipped his laptop bag. "Because I quit yesterday, and I want in. If Phoenix is hiring, I'd rather build something that works than keep pretending this isn't a sinking ship." That night, as the rain cleared and the lake shimmered under moonlight, Michael made a quiet decision. He wasn't going back, but he was moving forward, with people who still knew how to build something that lasted. "Westbrook just pulled the plug on AmeriCorps," Lawrence said, "and they want us to take over." It was just past 8 a.m. when Michael stepped into the Phoenix Estates Executive Conference Room in Austin, Texas. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the glass table in morning light. Whiteboards were cluttered with diagrams from the previous night's planning sprint. Outside, the skyline shimmered with tech ambition and real estate boom. Inside, tension was high, the kind that felt like opportunity or catastrophe, depending on who was leading the room. Lawrence Knight, the CEO of Phoenix Estates, stood at the head of the table. Clean-cut, sharp-witted, and usually calm. Today, he looked rattled. Across from him, Michael Trent, now CTO of Phoenix, sipped his coffee with measured calm. A few new faces filled the seats. Project managers, senior devs, and a financial strategist from Westbrook Properties. All eyes were on Michael. Westbrook Properties, managing over 10,000 residential units across the Northeast, had terminated its contract with AmeriCorps due to ongoing technical failures. They now approached Phoenix Estates with an urgent request: absorb their entire portfolio in under 90 days. If Phoenix failed, both companies would suffer public fallout, tenant backlash, and potential lawsuits. Phoenix's infrastructure wasn't ready. Their current system handled 6,000 units smoothly, but doubling that, dangerous and fast. Michael asked the hard questions. What does Westbrook need on day one? What absolutely cannot break? The financial strategist replied, tenant portals, payment gateways, maintenance requests, and historical leasing data, all of it, and without fail. Michael nodded slowly. It's possible, but not with the current architecture. We'll need to restructure and scale, not just patch things together. We'll need to build hybrid modules, interoperable with legacy data while forward compatible with our system. How long will that take? Lawrence asked. Michael exhaled. 8 weeks minimum, but that's with conditions. 3 conditions, Michael said, standing. 1, full budget approval for dedicated server infrastructure. No shared hosting, no compromises. 2, 3 additional senior engineers brought on immediately. And 3, we document everything from day one. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. 3 weeks of documentation? That'll slow us down. Michael didn't blink. That's where AmeriCorps failed. No shortcuts. We build this to last, or we don't build it at all. A long silence followed. Then Lawrence nodded. Done. You'll have everything you need. By noon, job offers had gone out to 3 hand-picked senior engineers, including 2 who had just resigned from AmeriCorps. Phoenix's infrastructure expansion began the same day. Alan Reyes, now part of Michael's team, led the database migration planning. Michael worked late into the nights mapping dependencies, designing load balancing structures, and drafting training documents alongside the codebase. His approach was methodical, controlled, but urgent. The office buzzed with purpose. For the first time, Phoenix was becoming more than a fast-scaling company. It was becoming a resilient one. A week later, as Michael was reviewing scalability test results, Lawrence entered his office holding a manila folder. Confidential, he said, handing it over. Inside was a draft of the acquisition agreement. AmeriCorps was bleeding, and Phoenix had made an offer to acquire it for less than 25% of its valuation 6 months prior. Lawrence looked at Michael. They said, yes, it's happening. We're taking over. Michael closed the folder slowly. The company that once discarded him was about to become part of the one he rebuilt. Not from revenge, but necessity. Then we do it right, Michael said. All of it. No shortcuts. Lawrence grinned. Just the way you taught us. Victor, Justin Bayou said hesitantly over the phone. The board was misled. Graham's out. If you're ever interested in coming back. It had been nearly a year since Michael walked out of AmeriCorps Living's headquarters with a cardboard box and 18 years of memories. Now that very same headquarters bore a new name on the glass doors. Phoenix Integrated Property Management. The deal had closed. Phoenix had officially acquired AmeriCorps for a quarter of its previous valuation. The sun filtered through the windows of Michael's new office on the top floor. The same building, but the energy had shifted. The sterile, high-pressure buzz was replaced with a hum of collaboration. No more forced smiles, no more corporate theater. Michael Trent had returned, but not as a subordinate, not as a savior. He was now Chief Integration Officer, leading the effort to absorb AmeriCorps' operations into Phoenix architecture. Justin Bayou, the son of AmeriCorps' founder and now a consultant on the board, had remained as part of the transition team. Gone were the faces that once pushed Michael out. Brandon had resigned under pressure. Diane had moved on. The consultants who once nodded through his technical explanations had been replaced with engineers eager to learn. Despite the title and the triumph, Michael felt no vindication. The real challenge wasn't beating the people who underestimated him. It was restoring the dignity of a broken system, rebuilding trust among legacy employees, and navigating the silent tension in every hallway he now walked again. Some greeted him with quiet nods. Others avoided eye contact. The most difficult were those who had cheered his removal, but were now forced to rely on his guidance. Michael approached the process systematically. First, he met with former AmeriCorps engineering staff to assess which systems could be salvaged. Most were either unstable or undocumented. Then he created a phased roadmap to migrate departments to Phoenix platform. He instituted mandatory training sessions, not to humiliate, but to uplift. He brought Alan Reyes on board full-time, tasking him with rebuilding the AmeriCorps data architecture. A few engineers from the old team requested to join the project voluntarily. That surprised him. Justin, watching it all unfold, admitted during one lunch break, "I didn't understand what you did back then, but I see it now." During a town hall meeting in the same auditorium where Brandon once presented the quarterly slide deck, Michael stepped up to the podium. Behind him, the screen read, "Integration Roadmap, from breakdown to breakthrough." He looked out at a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. I know many of you feel uncertain, he began. Some of you remember the old days. Some of you came in after. But what we build here won't be about who was right or wrong. It'll be about doing it right this time. He paused, letting it sink in. There will be documentation. There will be shared knowledge. There will be no single points of failure. This isn't about me. It's about us building something that outlasts any one person. After the meeting, a few hesitant employees approached him. A young engineer, fresh from college, said, "I heard stories about you. I'm glad I get to work with the real version." Others followed suit, offering support, asking questions. Old scars remained, but they were healing. The culture was shifting, not by mandate, but by example. Michael never once brought up his departure. He didn't need to. The silence spoke louder. In the server room, now partially dismantled, he saw machines he'd once spec'd and configured with his own hands. Lawrence stood beside him. "You want to go in?" Lawrence asked. Michael shook his head. "We're migrating soon anyway." Outside, the snow had begun to fall lightly. Through the glass, the new signage gleamed against the fading sky. Michael turned away from the machines of the past and walked toward the future he was building. No triumph, no revenge, just legacy work, done right, finally being recognized. The next week, he'd begin his final transition, leaving the integration role to lead Phoenix's new technical education division, a place not for fixing broken systems, but for preventing them altogether. He'd made it full circle, and this time it was on his own terms. "The board approved your proposal," Lawrence said as Michael entered his office. "You'll head the new technical education division." It was a crisp autumn morning in Rochester. The leaves along Lake Ontario shimmered in fiery shades of red and gold, and the air carried that perfect balance of cold and clarity. At Devlin Integrated Property Management, formerly AmeriCorps, Michael Trent walked through the familiar lobby, this time not as an outsider returning, but as the man leading the future. Michael had spent the past year rebuilding not just systems, but trust. Now nearing 57, he had redefined his role from engineer to architect, then from architect to mentor. Lawrence Devlin, the CEO who saw his worth from the beginning, now stood beside him not just as a superior, but as a believer. Their partnership had transformed a broken acquisition into a model of modern enterprise. The technical integration was complete. Systems were stable, clients were happy, and Devlin had more than doubled in scale. But Michael wasn't content. He knew stability was temporary without succession. He had pushed for a dedicated division to train the next generation of system engineers, one that emphasized documentation, architecture, ethics, and foresight. Not everyone on the board had agreed. For weeks, Michael had campaigned internally, presenting metrics, designing a syllabus, even interviewing potential instructors. He wasn't trying to build a school. He was trying to build a legacy. There had been pushback. Some thought the idea was idealistic, unprofitable. Others feared training would empower talent to leave. But Michael insisted. "What we don't document today becomes tomorrow's disaster," he had told them. Lawrence had finally brought the proposal to vote, and now here it was. Approval, full autonomy, budget, staff. Michael stood in Lawrence's office with the weight of possibility in his hands. "You'll design the curriculum," Lawrence said. "You'll hire your own people. This is your vision." Michael didn't smile, not because he wasn't proud, but because he understood the responsibility. That afternoon, he cleared out his integration office. Not with sadness this time, but with purpose. He left behind architecture blueprints and server maps. In their place, he pinned a new set of documents to the whiteboard. Course modules, mentorship tracks, onboarding schedules. Alan Reyes would join as the first instructor. Former colleagues from AmeriCorps had applied too, some seeking redemption, others a restart. As he packed, Justin Bayou knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" Michael nodded. They walked to the small courtyard outside the building. The trees rustled above, and the wind smelled like wet earth and distant bonfires. "My father asked about you," Justin said. "He's retired in Florida now, fishing a lot, but he still reads company updates. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking." Michael's expression softened. "He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make," Justin added. Turns out he was right. Michael didn't reply immediately. He looked out across the courtyard, watching the light cut through the branches. Maybe, he said at last, but sometimes the best outcomes come from the worst decisions. The next week, Michael stood in front of the inaugural class of the Technical Education Division. Some were recent hires. Others had left AmeriCorps disillusioned and returned for a second chance. Most were quiet, unsure of what this program would become. Michael opened with a slide, a simple line of code from the original AmeriCorps system. This, he said, crashed an entire payment system because no one documented why it was written this way. He looked around the room. Our job is not just to code. Our job is to build systems that survive us, because we won't always be here, but the things we build will be. He paused, then added, and when they don't, someone else has to understand why. As the projector dimmed and the course began, Michael didn't feel vindicated. He felt anchored. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that after everything, the misjudgments, the layoffs, the corporate chessboard, he had carved out a space where quality, integrity, and mentorship would outlive titles and trends. Outside the training room, the sign read, Legacy Systems Division, Director, Michael Trent. Not because he clung to the past, but because he finally understood the future. And this time, it would be written down.